Well, it's a thriller, but it's also, like many of my books, it's my opportunity to talk a little bit about society and what crime does to small communities. And in this book, I'm back in Grant County, which I've written about for many years, and I get to show the county in a very different light from what we've normally seen. Sarah Linton, my main character, is back there, and she's been away for 3.5 years, and she sees the town a little differently now. I think it might surprise readers that she doesn't have such a rosy picture of the place she grew up anymore.
What has changed?
Well, for one thing, Sarah had something very big happen, and I won't tell anyone,
of course.
in case it spoils it for them. But you know, she went away from Grant County. She moved to Atlanta and started a different life away from the town. And you know, being back with her parents and her family, which is normally such a comforting place for her to be, is no longer comforting to her. It's actually, in many ways, painful for her. And so when she gets a call from the police station and they say, well, we need you here at the police station, she takes that as an opportunity to get away, and rather than her normal reaction, which would be, well, you know, I'm with my family, I can't do that, she actually goes to the crime that is occurring and embraces it in many ways.
And she gets part of the process.
Exactly, yeah, she sticks her nose in it.
Okay, but earlier you said it's, for you, it's an opportunity to say something about America, probably, or life in America.
Well, definitely. You know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about in this book is rural poverty. I mean, we always see on television the poor people living in cities, but we don't really see the poor people who live in small town America. And there are more of us living in small towns than live in large cities. So it seems really odd that this is a topic that hasn't really gotten to the forefront yet. But if you think about, if you live in a very small town, you don't have a shelter, you don't have the safety net that society generally gives women and children, especially in large cities. And so the book opens with a woman named Allison Spooner, who's going to college, she's paying her way, she's working a very difficult job at the local diner, she's doing everything right, and nothing works out for her. And we find out as the book progresses that this has led her to do some really desperate things.
And poverty in the rural areas is a big issue?
It definitely is. It's something that I feel very close to. My father, when he was growing up, was extremely poor. His 8 brothers and sisters and his mother and father would squat in houses or shacks that they found, and they would get kicked out and they would just move to the next one. And you know, the first thing they would do is look for wood because they would need to cover the dirt floor. So this is the life that my father grew up in. He, thankfully for me, managed to pull himself out of that. He became very successful when I was growing up and gave us a very nice middle-class life. But I would go and visit his family and see how other people were living. You know, usually if you're living in a suburban American life, you don't really see how other people live outside of your own world. So it was very educational for me, and in many ways very frightening, because it gave me the understanding that as nice as things were that we had, that could be taken away.
And how come this poverty?
Well, you know, it's just circumstance, and my grandfather was not an educated man. He was not a particularly industrious man. He liked to sit around and drink, and he made moonshine. He was chased by the revenuers because it was illegal to make your own alcohol in any form then, and so he was constantly running away from policemen and drinking too much and not taking care of his family.
Okay, but that's, I suppose, in the 50s.
Yes.
Of the last century.
Yes.
But now you say there still is.
There certainly is. I mean,
poverty.
We have this idea that everyone in America is very wealthy, but it's very expensive to travel to Europe, so it's not the very poor Americans who are doing that. I mean, just taking off a week of work, for instance, is something that a lot of Americans could not afford to do.
But in your book, you're not especially painting a very positive image of rural America.
Well, I think you'd be hard-pressed to say it's a nice thing to be very poor. I know from my uncles and my cousins that they had happiness in their lives. They still have happiness in their lives. I mean, a lot of my family still live in trailer parks, and they live in very modest homes, and they go to work and they come home and they spend time with their children, and there's a certain dignity in that. But some people just are not wired like my father to say, I want to go up to that next social level. You know, they don't really have the personality to do that or the wherewithal, because, you know, if they're happy with their lives as they are, why would they change it?
Could you say that your writing is a statement?
Well, in some ways it is. I mean, at a very base level, I'm entertaining people, and I never lose sight of that. But I do try to insert in the book some social statement, and this one, of course, about poverty.
And you always do?
I always do. You know, whether I'm writing about abuse against women or sexual crimes or child abuse or anything like that, I do try to show through my writing what is actually going on, and there are many things that people just don't pay attention to. For instance, I know that Holland was in the World Cup. I know there was some disappointment there, and you know, but it was interesting to me to read a newspaper article that found that when Holland lost a game, there was more domestic violence. And to me, that's something that we need to pay attention to, you know? I mean, how many women out there in the Netherlands were cringing when the game was lost because they knew what was coming? And meanwhile, you know, someone maybe in Amsterdam was just thinking, you know, oh, I'm very depressed we lost this game. Well, for a woman in a certain area, in a certain relationship, that meant that she would probably end up in the hospital. And that's the sort of thing I like to talk about, because I am writing in a genre that historically has not treated women very nicely. And I want to be very careful as a woman writing about violence, sometimes against women, to show it for what it is. There's no glamour in it.
And does that mean that that there has to be some sort of political relevance in the book?
Well, I don't think it's political. I think people want to say that not wanting women abused is a political thing, but I don't think any woman wants to be abused, whether she's Sarah Palin or Hillary Clinton.
But are you yourself politically involved, for instance?
Not as much as I used to be. I was very disappointed that Hillary Clinton didn't win, which I've made no secret of. I thought she would have been excellent. I was very, very nervous when she was running and when Sarah Palin was running about the anti-woman rhetoric that was going on, most of the time from other women.
How come?
I think that women are trained from a very early age to think ambition in a woman is a bad thing. And there's a saying in the South that we have, no one likes an angry woman. And so, you know, women included, they don't want a woman who is making demands. It's just not something that is accepted as much in America. And, you know, historically, we've made great gains as women in America, but this is the first year that we're probably going to see women lose seats in the Congress of our government. And it's just part of that backlash.
But you're not especially a feminist.
Well, I would call
Right.
myself a feminist, but I think that personally I'm a feminist, and I feel like when I write my books I'm conscious of that, but my characters are also my characters. I don't think, for instance, my character Lena Adams would call herself a feminist. She would probably vote for Sarah Palin. Police officers in America, and I think everywhere, tend to be very conservative. They're very pro-justice, pro-taking care of business, as we say in America, and Lena certainly has that leaning. But, you know, again, she's an opportunity for me to show another side of that kind of person, because the fact that she is not an extremely liberal person does not mean she is a bad person. It means that's just how she feels.
And could you say that writing crime novels is some sort of a strategy to discuss these themes?
Well, I don't know. I don't consciously feel that way, but I think every writer has some sort of, I don't want to say agenda because that sounds too deliberate, but they have something they want to do with their writing. And if you look at Flannery O'Connor's letters, for instance, I mean, this was a woman who was extremely religious, She was so rooted in her Catholic faith. She was a stranger in her own land because there weren't many Catholics in Georgia at the time. She had this wonderful international life as a writer. She lived on a very small farm with her mother, so she was a walking dichotomy. But she did, if you read her letters, she did have things she very deliberately wanted to do with her stories. And the beautiful thing about her writing is she tells stories for everyone. So if you're a Catholic and you're looking for some religious meaning, you'll find it in one of her stories. Or if you just want a good read about violence, you'll find it there. Or if you just enjoy Southern Gothic, it's there.
I think you're very popular throughout the Western world.
I'm very fortunate, yeah.
Yeah. What makes you, what explains your success?
I have no idea. I wish I could take complete credit for it and say I'm a stupendous writer and that's it. But in Holland, for instance, I will humbly say, the best publisher in Holland, which is the Busy Bee, Cargo, the imprint. I mean, I'm very lucky that Robert Amerlan read my stuff and really understood what I was trying to do. And in many countries, that's been the key. A publisher who really feels passionate about my work and knows that I'm not doing something, where I'm just writing on the back of a napkin and saying, oh, that's art. I really do feel when I write that I'm telling a story that I want to tell, and my publishers encourage that. And of course, I'm very fortunate that my readers want to read about it.
But my feeling is that there must be some sort of a collective thing in the reception of your work in the Western world that explains your success. And that's not only the publisher, I think.
Yeah, but it's different components. It really is. Booksellers who love reading and say, this is the book you have to read, or any number of things. I think if you want to look at the nature of the stories, even when I'm writing in Atlanta, which is a city that in the metropolitan area I think has about 8 million people now, so half your population, this is a story that I am writing about small towns. And even when you meet someone from New York, they don't say I'm from New York City, they say I'm from the Village or the Upper West Side or East Side. And people want to feel like they belong in communities. And so it's what I said earlier, less than 10 of the cities in America have more than 1 million people. So America is made up of small towns, and most of the Western world is still made up of very small towns. And there are elements that are very relatable. There's, the town wanton woman, there's the busybody and the gossip, and, the usual people who are from the right side of the tracks who live the very nice life and run things, and the people from the wrong side of the tracks who always get in trouble and cause the crimes. So I'm not really writing about something brand new. I'm writing about something that's very familiar to people.
So for many people, it's home, maybe, you're writing about.
I hope so. And I've had the great pleasure over the last 10 years that I've been published in Holland of going, from one side of the country to the other. Like I've been to Friesland, and I won't pronounce the other names of the towns I've been to because you wouldn't recognize them with my bad accent. But I have seen a great deal of the Netherlands, and I think that readers are the same everywhere. They want to get into a book and feel like, as you said, that this is my home. And then in the context of feeling familiar and being almost lulled into safety, to have something really bad happen is a shocking thing. And it's a gripping thing. And I think that's the key to a story, is having that sense of safety and then having that safety pulled away from you.
Let's get back to this book. What was the source of inspiration for this book?
Well, for this book, I mentioned something bad happened a few books ago for Sarah, and I needed to go back to Grant County and show what had happened to Grant County without her.
In order to show
to help my readers in many ways, and to help me, because it was a difficult decision I made a few books back, and I wanted that decision to resonate through the book. So the book called Genesis here, you have Sarah almost immediately after what happened, and she's going through what I think of as a mourning process. And then the next book with Verbroken, you have her going back home. She's finally to a place in her life where she feels like she can go home and confront these ghosts that still haunt her. And then, I wanted to show what Lena Adams is doing. I've written about Lena for so long, and I didn't want to just leave her out there in the lurch. And for me, Lena has always been one of my favorite characters. She's so fun to write. And in this book, she's kind of depressed and very low-key, but she keeps making very small mistakes that lead to very big problems. And then, of course, being the person she is, she keeps trying to pull herself out of this hole that she's dug. But we have a saying in the South, if you're in a hole, stop digging. And she doesn't stop digging. She keeps making more mistakes. She keeps trying to cover up and ends up getting in a very bad place.
But as you said, under the influence of poverty, people tend to do extreme things.
They do,
and
they do.
What was the inspiration to take that subject?
Because the economy is so horrible that we're seeing such dramatic spikes in violent crime, child abuse, domestic violence, rape, the sorts of what we think of as anger crimes. And so you have people who are very frustrated, very angry, and they take it out generally on women and children. And I wanted to really talk very frankly about how those crimes affect communities, and how, this book, for instance, is more about financial malfeasance, we'll say, but it's about someone who's so desperate not to fall back into poverty that they'll do anything to get out of it.
How long does it take you to write a book like this?
A year, which is good because they want a book a year.
They want a book a year?
Yes.
And they are the publishers?
The
or
publishers,
the audience?
yeah. Well, I think the audience too. Sometimes they say they want more than one, but I don't think they'd really enjoy it if I had to do two, because it wouldn't be as good, I think.
And it's in your contract? You have to write a book a year?
Yes, it's in my contract, my delivery dates. But I work very quickly, and I like telling a story a year. I think it gives the series immediacy. And really pulls you into the characters. And if you know every year in the summertime you're going to be able to check in on Sarah and Will or Lena or Faith or any of these people who hopefully feel like friends to you, I think it's a good thing to know this will be the book you take to the beach, or take off work and curl up on the couch for a few days and read.
But does this mean that you have a long-term plan for
yes,
developments in...
Definitely.
You do?
I always have.
You know what's going to happen in 2015?
I do.
You do?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I always, as soon as I finish a book, I write the first chapter for the next book, just to keep a consistency of tone. But I also write notes at that time, because generally halfway through one book, I'm already very sure about what the next book will be about. And when you're telling a story about characters long term, it's very easy to come up with lots of ideas, but you can't put them in one book. And so having many books and knowing that, in Holland, for instance, I've got at least 4 more that I have to write for my publisher, gives me the ability to plan long term and make sure I'm telling the best story for that book at that time.
So you know what's going to happen in 2015?
I do. I can't tell.
But from there?
From there, well, who knows? Hopefully I'll have more, but we'll see.
But there's no plan?
Not yet. Not yet.
Afterwards?
Yeah. I'm sure I'll keep writing.
Okay. And this deadline doesn't make you nervous?
Not really. I usually, before I start my European tours, I'm halfway through. And so I feel pretty confident about where the book is going, and no problem delivering it probably by Christmas.
And it never stops flowing?
Not yet. You're making me very nervous, though. We should knock on wood here.